Yeah.
Ooh, that sounds nice. I've heard of some of the native flowers in Texas can be made into tea, and I've always wanted to try that.
Oh, cool. Is that where you are?
Yeah, yeah. I'm out in
Nice.
Yeehaw country.
You're like just a couple states away from me. Are you like right
Mhm.
smack in the middle of the country, I think? Is that like a middle marker or is that more west than I'm thinking of? I'm like right up against the coast. Well, not
Oh,
my city, but my state is.
uh-huh. That's neat. Yeehaw land gang. Ah, yes. Big agree. Yeah.
Tapping my phone because I put it on battery saver
Uh-huh.
and it like goes dark every 30 seconds. I do that because my phone battery sucks and that but my phone is the only thing that I can really access Discord on.
Yeah,
I
that's
could
fair.
ac I could access it from my iPad, but I wouldn't be able to do voice call then because it uses browser.
Uh-huh.
And for some reason, when you do browser, you can't join or make calls.
That is so weird.
Okay, we got about 2-ish minutes.
Okay, awesome.
You may or may not hear my dogs barking during this too. It's getting to be close to mealtime for one of my dogs, and she gets super impatient.
Yeah, it's kind of like afternoon.
Yeah, she used to we give her she's a bit chubby, so we have to watch her weight. So we give her 2 meals a day, one like early morning and then one around 4.
Oh,
And she gets green beans, which
what could
actually
go
our vet recommended.
the same thing actually.
Oh, I love labs.
Very wholesome.
I pet sit, so I have a couple clients that have labs.
Uh-huh. Oh, labs are so much fun to be around.
People are like, show dog, show dog.
Please show dog.
I have, let me find a picture of, okay, here's a picture of Zero, our little Maltese mix. And
Mhm.
then let me try to find one of Chloe, who's our chubby little terrier. Where
Mhm.
is it? It's in my favorites. This one's cute. She she's kind of weird. She gets a bit squirrely sometimes.
Sure.
So she does this thing where she likes to try to lick you in the inside of the mouth. It's super gross, but that's her thing. You have to like watch out.
Mhm.
Chloe is always happy. She's always like wag her tail.
Mhm.
So yep,
That
those
is
are my doggos.
wonderful. What a great way to start off the panel. Everyone gets a dog.
Yeah, dogs
Oh.
for everyone, except if you're allergic.
Mhm.
Okay, it is about time to start the panel.
Mhm. I will begin with what
Yeah,
exactly
I'll
an
let you begin.
original. Yeah. So, thank you everyone for coming to the panel today. I really appreciate
Oh, we should
everyone being
introduce
here.
ourselves.
Yes.
You wanna go
Mine
first?
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't mind at all. My name is Scar. I am a threatening wolf, he, him, and happy to be here.
Um,
How
okay, I guess I'll go.
Mhm.
Um, why is it now that I'm getting tongue-tied? It's just an introduction.
Oh, don't
Okay.
worry about it, it's all good.
Is Apíkira. It's a vampiric form of the name Abigail. Though I am questioning my gender, I go in between girl and non-binary, and I'm just kinda going back and forth. I'm, pretty fluid, I guess. So
Mhm.
I've, tried out the name Keelan in a couple of circles. My pronouns are she, her, or they, them, and my kintype is a Vampirí.
Wonderful.
Brooke says, "There are vampiric names? Lit. Yes.
Yeah.
We will get there in a minute. I will definitely talk about that."
Mhm. Okay.
Oh, yeah, someone mentioned gender flux.
Oh, yeah.
Because okay, so, I will let you begin with, defining what exactly an original species is.
Yeah. So let's get into that. So, what exactly is an original species? So, I know some of us in the art community may have heard of this term before to refer to a species of a creature an artist makes that is new concept entirely and its own creature. It's kind of similar to a brand. All of the creatures made under the species name share core traits that define them as a coherent species. Like, an example might be elites from the Halo franchise. The creatures all look nothing like something we would see in real life, past, present, or in myth, but they all have a core defining trait that strings them together as a species. So that's what an artist version is, but how does someone who is otherkin, relate to that original species label? Um, It means that someone who identifies with an original species also doesn't identify as something known in the present, past, or myth or pop culture. Instead, an original species are the first one to name themselves and define exactly what they are, kind of pioneering in a sense. And I think it would be a good idea to kick off with your experience. There's some really good questions, and we're gonna have a Q&A at the end, and we can answer those questions there. So save some interesting questions, and we can get to them later because I think we could have some great discussions. Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, I can also only hear myself. I can't hear. Hmm. Looks like we're having technical difficulties. Oh, okay.
Yep, Epicura was muted. Hooray for technology. Muted rip.
Oof. Oh
Can you hear me
no.
now?
Yes.
I muted myself in case, like, there was, like, a loud noise or
Noises.
something, and I didn't wanna interrupt you, but then I thought I had unmuted myself, and then I guess I didn't. Anyway, I'm going to use my species as an example of an original species. Um, what I typed out in the chat was how I spell it using, I guess, Latin letters, yes,
Mhm.
how you the right term for it is, but, you know, the English, Spanish, Roman, not Roman, you know what I'm talking about, that type of alphabet. Um, so I use the accented I to differentiate between, thank you, Latin alphabet, um, to differentiate between 2 different I sounds. So anyway, um, fairy is a species of vampire. I'm a biology nerd, so I think of it in terms of genus and species. You have your Dracula Untold vampires, you have your Twilight vampires, your classic Dracula, your Nosferatu. They all fall under the quote unquote genus of vampire, but they're all unique in their own way so that they're their own quote unquote species, if that makes sense. Like they all fall under the category of vampire, but they're all different. Um, if vampire were to exist in our own world, they would actually be their own species, probably related to humans since they're really similar to humans. Like they probably would be genetically, and they'd probably fall under the genus Homo. Homo vampire. I don't know. I don't do Latin. um. So appearance. Vampire tend to have darker hair, like browns and blacks. Maybe some reddish tint might come through. They have fair skin, though can have darker skin tones if one of their parents is like a darker skinned human or a humanoid species like an elf of some kind. All vampire have irises that are some shade of purple. They can be gray purple, blue purple, brown purple, lavender, any shade of purple as long as purple is like the base color. Our fingernails are kind of claw like, and of course, we have fangs. Just a simple pair of fangs where our incisors would be, and they can actually retract their fangs when not in use. So that's useful. Um, when they feed, possible trigger warning for like hunting and stuff like that. Um, when they feed, we do have venom that paralyzes the prey that we bite into, which makes it a whole lot easier. Um, I have to turn my phone back on to view the chat. Um, some people are giving species name suggestions. Um, we just have two fangs, I guess one on each side, just like a lot of like typical vampires would. Where was I? We also have subtly pointed ears. So think of it as like if a human ear had a pointed tip, like the same general size. It wouldn't be like long, like Link or Zelda. I think they're called Hyrulean. How some elves have like really, really long ears that are like a foot long. Yeah, we don't have that. um, so when it comes to lifestyle, traditionally vampires live in forests, specifically in caves. We like the dark. We can tolerate the sun. Keyword tolerate. Wide brimmed hats are often used for travel. And we often use hides and furs from the animals we hunt to make clothes and blankets or pillows and all that stuff. Everything we need and use comes from the land around us. It comes from our territory. We don't do the whole agriculture thing. A vampire may sell or trade extra furs and hides for crafts or some luxuries humans might enjoy, like certain ingredients that aren't native to a vampire's territory, or fabrics that a vampire just wouldn't make, like silk or something. Vampire also live in packs. around 20 individuals at the very most. Most pack or many packs are as small as 5 people. Average might be like, I don't know, 10. Um, the Matasu is the leader of the pack, and each pack has their own name and symbol. I'm lucky to have my own pack, the Korutao pack. It comes from the words koruai, which means dawn, and utao, which means song. An exact translation is dawn song. The deeper meaning is that the dawn brings a new day. Yesterday might have sucked, but today will be better. The dawn is like a song that brings um the language I find to be an interesting topic as well. It's the thing I tend to focus on the most when thinking about my species. Since vampiri are an original species, their language is technically a conlang, which is short for constructed language. Think Sindarin, Quenya, Klingon, Dothraki, those languages. Um, I guess a conlang is one that you build on your own. They don't like occur naturally, I guess. Um, and the language is called Vampiric. I've actually made a script, like a alphabet, and figured out the main parts of the grammar. I just have to make a heck of a lot more vocabulary, which is going to be the hard part because that's going to be take a long time. Languages have a lot of words. um, the language also takes some vocabulary inspiration from vampire spirituality. I believe in the translation that I normally use is quote unquote spirit, but I guess they're more like kami, I think. They're not as powerful as what in the West tend to think of as deities. I guess they're like deities with a hint of animism. The main ones are Guren, the spirit of life, Oru, the one who takes souls of those who have passed away to live in the stars. That's where it's kind of like myth, story, legend, I guess. Stars are the souls of those who have passed, and we have so many of them. And if you were really awesome in life, your star will shine really bright. Um, where was I? There are the twins, Koro and Kira, and then there's Torto and Ponyo. Koro is considered to be masculine and is the sun and represents bodily health, while Kira is seen as being feminine and is the moon and represents mental health. Torto represents protection, and his symbol is a turtle. Ponyo doesn't really do much, but they represent happiness and joy, and his symbol is a little white rabbit because bunnies are cute. Um, and Ponyo is neither feminine or masculine. They're actually seen as non-binary. Tortho might be non-binary. I don't know yet, but I've always thought of him as being masculine for some reason. And I actually haven't come up with a word for quote unquote spirit yet, like what they would be called. Um, so moving on. I often imagine vampire living in Middle Earth for some reason. The creation of my species' culture and behaviors and other stuff didn't start until I had seen Lord of the Rings. Middle Earth is such an amazing environment for them to live in, with forests and mountains and caves and all that good stuff. Um, if they were to live in Middle Earth, they would hands down get along with elves the best. The vampiric language even has some inspiration from Quenya when it comes to certain vocabulary. The most of the influence for the language comes from Japanese. Some of you may have noticed that. Um, there was also an interesting behavior that female vampire exhibit. At one point in their life, they quote unquote imprint on a humanoid being that needs care of some sort. Mm, I had a self insert character a long time ago. I'll use her as an example. Um, so remember when I mentioned Lord of the Rings being an important, I guess, catalyst of sorts? My original character, I named her Sakaf for some reason. No idea what it means. Actually imprints on Smeagol after he acquires the One Ring. Um, I guess that's kind of a oddly specific example. Vampiri don't choose who they imprint on or when. Now, forgive me, I'm about to use Twilight to explain. Bear with me. It's kind of like when Jacob imprinted on what's her name and that other vampire guy's daughter, Edward Bella, I don't know. Anyway, he describes it as his whole world revolves around her and he has to protect her and stuff. With Vampiri, there is absolutely no romantic connotation. Ew, no, absolutely not. Um, I guess the closest thing I can compare it to is a guardianship, kind of like a mother and child type thing, but different. Um, Vampiri and Mirvani, as they're called, like the being that you imprint on. Like, we have words like mom, dad, aunt, uncle, Mirvani. That's what that is. It's like a, I guess, family vocab name. Vocab name? Wow. um, anyway, the Vampiri and Mirvani um, form an intense psychological bond. Kunmiri, who is the Vampiri who imprinted, like mother is to son, as um, Kunmiri is to Mirvani. I don't know how well I'm explaining it. Language is weird. um, but anyway, the Kunmiri becomes protective over their Mirvani. And if the Mirvani dies, the event wreaks havoc on the mental health of the Kunmiri. Like that's how strong that psychological bond is. And if it's like broken prematurely, bad things happen. It's not good. um this bond is so important that all vampiri just agree to never ever ever harm another vampiri's Mirvani. Like that is the worst thing you could possibly do. It's like worse than murder. Like you just don't go there. Um I'm probably using the word imprint wrong, but vampiri don't follow human language rules. Ha. It's just the best translation I can really think of. Anyway, back to the spirituality stuff, it is said that Porto is the one who decides who imprints on who and when. Like, hey, this person needs you, and you probably need them too. So let's make you guys form the strongest bond you will ever have in your life, and you will always be there for each other. Um, so yeah, that is my original species, and you can ask as many questions as you want at the end. Scar, do you want to talk about your, I guess, experience? Do you want to
Abs
talk about your original species or anything? Or because I've
Mhm.
been talking for a while, so I thought I'd give you some time to speak.
Oh, oh, it's good. Really fascinating stuff. Thank you for
Aw,
your
thank you.
perspective and story. Really appreciate it. Um, for me, I am at like the opposite end of the spectrum when it comes to original species, where I know not much or little to none about my original species. So I seem to be facing like this whole other world about what it means to be an original species. Um, for me, I find that I have some differences compared to being otherkin, in that I feel as though, I have no blueprint, um, about what I can work off of in developing my self identity, you know, when you feel like that there's nothing you can relate to and describe who you are, it's very difficult to try and build this original species that you are when you have no solid groundwork. So for me, I guess like a cool thing about it is that, I technically can't do anything wrong. Like, I'll never be able to mess up or misrepresent the species because I'm just doing the best that I can with what I have. It's always going to be a learning experience. It's always going to be something that I'm working on in the background and improving. I'm the only scientist researching and putting data into the species and making it more well known. At the same time, knowing that you are the only person representing your species feels like a lot, and that, you have to uphold, at least for me, this like scientific structure of like, what should the scientific name be? What behaviors do I need to note the most? Like, I need a repertoire, I need like pictures and information, and I'm only one person, and what I'm really like trying to find is just little behaviors that I do in day to day and trying to note them down and create a bigger picture with it, which can be very hard. Um, I think for me, um, some things that are hard for me is the whole behaviors I don't fully understand yet, and my reactions to them because I just don't fully understand what my identity is yet, and I don't fully understand like the animal that I am. So I have to kind of write everything down and wonder why a reaction might have occurred and how that's happening. And I have an animalistic identity as I would say the closest thing I can call it is a hyena wolf werewolf hybrid. It's bipedal and quadrupedal. Um, the information that I have right now is complex body language, where most communication is done through body language, and then less so, not very complex vocalizations like grunts, growls, and whimpers. It's run in a matriarchy where there is a female leader and females run packs, and packs are very small, about 2 to 5. And more than that, it doesn't really seem to happen, just from what I can understand. And that is all I've learned about myself in about 8 years of self-discovery, are just these very little things. So I'm at like this totally other end of the spectrum, and I'm like, this is going to be a lifelong journey, fully figuring out exactly what I am. And I think the most frustrating part for it for me is if I start rejecting myself, if I start saying, I am not valid, I am making it up or something, and I just shut myself away and make a wall between myself and my like otherkin and identity, I can't make any progress. And I won't learn anything more about this species that I need to accept in order to be happy. Um, One thing I wanted to touch on is how it's seen in the community. Um, and I think for me, I got stigma that's been following me around for a while. So in my experience, I started in the Therian community, and I was there for about 3 to 4 years. This was in about 2012 when I first entered that community. And the first impressions I got of Otherkin were they are crazy people, they're people playing pretend, and some people even claimed in order to be a true Therian, you needed Native American blood. Needless to say, I was young, impressionable, and I was 14 at the time, and I just started questioning who I was and why I saw myself as an animal. And those first 4 years cemented into me that otherkin are not real, valid, or recognized with true Therians. I would learn later I joined a cult. that was a fun part in my life. Once I left that community with a strict regimen of meditation and strong dislike for otherkin, something I was but wouldn't let myself accept, I went silent in the community for about 2 to 3 years. In that time, I was in a lot of pain of only understanding that my identity was anything but real. Eventually, my species dysphoria began to peak, and I knew I needed help and reached out into Tumblr about last year. I finally admitted to myself that I was otherkin, but would still tell myself I was playing pretend. And in about a year, I saw a community that helped me tear down the old walls of cult that I was trapped in for so long. I saw myself as otherkin. I finally saw myself as otherkin. And when I started to read about other people's experiences, I started getting an unsettling feeling that I wasn't just a werewolf like I had been identifying as, and perhaps something deeper. I was an original species. And the feelings from the Therian communities in 2012 came flooding back, and I realized that the stigma I carried for otherkin, I also carried for original species. And I have more walls to tear down. And that's been my journey as an original species thus far. I don't have a lot, not quite to the same extent, but I'm getting there. I guess everyone has their own different journey, right?
Wow. Whoa. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I guess with my journey of, I guess, figuring myself out, the vampire stuff started early, like, I guess, early elementary school, because I was
Mhm,
one of those kids that played by myself. People, I guess, didn't really want to play with me. Not
mhm,
that I really cared. I was kind of just doing my own little thing, but to entertain myself, I'd like make stories in my head. And
mhm.
I especially did this at night, trying to entertain myself while I waited to fall asleep because it takes forever for me to fall asleep. Um, so I would
Mhm.
imagine myself as a vampire. Um, sorry, I'm like, oh, oh, it's the dog. I was afraid it was my parents for a sec. um, Okay, where was I? Right, childhood. I imagine myself as a vampire, and I would, I guess, make up stories, like self-insert stories. The dog is scratching
Mhm.
on the door. I apologize. Hi, Butters. We're pet sitting, and Butters wanted to come in.
Thank you,
Sometimes
Butters, for
client
joining.
Sometimes clients have their dogs stay at our house.
Oh,
Hi. Yes, I know you are very cute. Um, Sorry, I'm trying not to get distracted. um, right. So that led to me making my self-insert character Sakaf that I briefly mentioned earlier. And I guess there was always a sense of meanness. No, don't take my shoe. That's not yours.
Butters, how
No.
dare you?
Okay, I'm gonna try to get him out of my room.
Okay.
You go play. You go play in the living room. No.
Top 10 anime betrayals, very real. I think that's exactly what's going on right now.
Hopefully, someone else will go entertain him. Um, so anyway, there was always a sense of me-ness. Like I always saw Sakaf as, I mean, she was me. She's literally a self-insert character.
I get it.
So that happened for at first she was kind of just this like, traditional gothic queen of the underworld type thing.
Mhm,
Um, it wasn't until think middle school-ish when I saw Lord of the Rings for the first time that I really started to think about them as a people. And I knew she was always slightly different from other vampires like Dracula, but I
Mhm,
just didn't know how yet. And the weird thing about being an original species is like I literally made that species. Like I made up that species. And like I just thought that's what it was, even though there was that deeper connection that I guess kind of suppressed really. It wasn't
mhm,
until later that um, even though like I didn't really use the character as much, the species was still very much a part of me. And around I think early high school, I had known about Otherkin straight
mhm,
weirdly from I think it was um like a top 10 subcultures
mhm.
video. And I'm like, "Oh, Otherkin, what's that?" Because at that time I had vague feelings of being non-human. And
Right,
I'm like, "Oh, am I that?" And I did a little bit of research and I literally thought you could only be like 5 kin types. Like you could either be a wolf or a dragon or a fairy or an elf or a demon. Otherwise you weren't otherkin. Like I thought it was like so
right.
limited. So I just dropped it. I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm a vampire. I guess I'm not otherkin." So then I just dropped it. And then
Mhm,
years later, like, probably not years later, maybe, like, 1 or 2. I was still in high
mhm.
school, this happened around senior year of high school. I'm talking fast because, hopefully we'll have time for Q&A. Well, we will. Um, shoot. Why do I lose my train of thought so quickly?
I
Um, right. So, it wasn't until around senior year of high school, I was going through some crap. I I guess was being bullied. I didn't trust anyone. And then there was this one kid that I met who like he was the only one I trusted. He was so sweet. He still is. We're not together, but man was he such a gentleman. And we just had such a strong bond. And for the first time I felt like I could really be myself. And that's when the shift started happening. And I'm
see
like, "Oh crap, what is this?" Because for years, since like middle school, this thing that I was subconsciously suppressing, my brain is like, "Oh, look, a person I can be myself around. Let's start being non human. Let's start being a vampire." And I'm like, "Oh dear, this is a thing." So I did more research and I explored myself some more and I joined a group on Facebook um, and that for about a week, I called myself other-hearted just because I was really afraid to call myself something that I wasn't.
uh-huh,
And then I realized, no, I identify as a vampire, not with a vampire. So I guess that makes me otherkin. So I
mhm.
joined the group and it was great. I had a really good first experience with otherkin groups until my parents found out, and they changed
Oh,
my password without my permission and all that good stuff, and I was 18 at the time, so not sure how legal it was for them to do that, but so then I was
not
cut off
very.
from the community.
Yeah,
Um,
like, I think for me too, I also started as like, since I'm part of a plural system, my identity was just immediately a wolf creature. So I had no idea, just assumed that I was like some kind of animal, always accepted it. Went to Google and just Googled, I think I'm a wolf or a werewolf question mark. Found the Therian community, hopped straight onto that cult train, and yeah, I understand that there is some discrimination when it comes to being otherkin too, which I think is kind of a hard topic. Like, you don't
yeah.
get to deal with that. We're gonna block you from that website. I'm sorry you had to
Yeah,
deal with that with your parents.
it's okay. We
Oh, yeah. RIP. You may be muted. They gone. They really just hmm. It might be a connection issue, perhaps. Hmm. Oof.
You guys hear me?
Yeah, there we go.
Yay! I guess my phone turned off or something. Someone. What was the last thing you guys heard?
I feel like an alien.
um.
Oh, sorry. That actually wasn't the correct quote. I would start back where you think that things left off.
Um. I was talking about. Oh, so being an original species, I always felt that somehow invalidated me as an otherkin
Mhm.
because, like, technically I created the species. So I was,
Yeah.
like, quote unquote, made it all up, which I guess technically I did. But now I identify as that thing. But I guess, I was always afraid of that kind of gatekeepy sort of thing, which thankfully I never met, but mostly because I kept that part of my kin type to myself. That was
Uh-huh.
until I saw one of PD's Syrian meat videos, and they were just chatting, and they I don't know if any of you guys have seen his channel, but during in the meat vlogs, there's parts where they go around in a circle and introduce themselves, and someone mentioned being an original species, and I was like, holy crap, I'm not alone. I am completely and totally valid, and I am not alone with being an original species. And the way they described it is like, oh, I made it, but over time my connection got stronger and stronger until I identified as that species. And I'm like, yes, that is it. That is me. That is my experience.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, and luckily for me, people have been super accepting. There was that one person that tried to grill me. It was in a different Discord server, but people were very quick to come to my defense. It was great. The person, I guess it was for like the person kept attributing otherkin to a past life, whereas I don't use spiritual explanations for it. I don't know what I believe when it comes to souls or spirituality and stuff like that. So for me, it's all, I guess, psychological based. Um, but yeah, the server was very quick to boot them and take care of it, which was super great. Um, I'm
Should we?
not I'm not entirely sure what more I want to say. We have about 20 minutes left. Do we
Oh,
want to start
awesome.
the Q&A?
I would like to say a little bit more.
Sure,
I actually,
of course. Go right ahead.
I, I have no idea why, but I thought we only had 5 minutes left. So I
Oh,
was like,
whoops.
we're
No,
cutting
we
it close. Okay. For me, I can relate a lot with your story. I started my journey when I was about 3 years old, and I always tried to fit into like an identity that was already created, like a species that already existed. I tried Mighty Anna from Pokemon. That was the first identity I tried to fit into a lot. Um, and it didn't really work out. I could tell that, like, some things were, like, just off. Nothing was clicking. Whenever I researched a lot, I noticed that there was this thing that usually happened where you find this animal and everything clicks together, or like a source or a canon, and you're like, finally, it all makes sense. Um, and I just never got that. Um, Whenever I started saying, well, maybe I'm not a Mightyena, maybe I'm a wolf, maybe I'm a Therian, the same thing just wouldn't happen. I would really try to fit into this identity of a wolf or a hyena, and it just would not happen. There was always something I felt like whenever I would get phantom shifts that didn't feel right. Like I'd want to stand up on two legs, and I'm like, well, they don't do that. Am I making this up? And you go through this spiral of like, is what I'm doing even like real? Am I really an otherkin or Therian? Because I'm not having the same experiences as everyone else. I don't understand. I'm like doing everything by the book, quote unquote, and it's still not working out. So you try, for me, I usually tried all these things, but one thing that I always had, and that, should have hinted to me that I really wasn't like another source, was that no matter what, I always knew I could shoot spikes out of my back as the animal that I was. Like whether I was a Mightyena, a hyena, or a wolf, I would always say, okay, yes, I'm that, but it also shoots spikes out of its back. And I couldn't explain why. I couldn't explain how. Um, but I just knew that had to be a core feature of whatever I was identifying with in order to make me feel more comfortable and connected. Um, and it took me so long to really look at things like that and be like, okay, I might not be Therian, and I might not be like Otherkin where I have a source or a set animal. Um, and going down the original species path, I have found that it's very difficult for me, I think, because I know there's no precedent for it. And so, again, just representing yourself and representing this species definitely feels like a lot of weight to me. And also pushing through that stigma that you're learning more about yourself. You learn these new things like spike shooting out of your back. For the longest time, I just thought I was trying to be edgy. And I was like, no, 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 no. That's like, it makes me feel comfortable, but I'm not adding that. And I'm not telling anyone about it because I can't explain it and it's a little bit too weird. But now, after this long journey, 8 years, I think only this past 3 months, I finally made a Latin name. I named them Hyenae spicatus, meaning spiked hyena. And, you know, like, it felt very validating to finally have a name, I guess, because I always just used the memory I had of whenever I was 5 and playing pretend with other kids. And in that moment, I wasn't thinking about how other people were judging me. So I just said, oh, I'm a wolf, I have spikes, and I'm playing with the other kids. And they're like, well, what are you? And I just said, I'm a threatening wolf, and just came up with it on the spot. And for years to myself, I always silently kept that name, that I was a threatening wolf, just because that was the first label I gave myself. Unadulterated, no stigma. It was just who I was, and that's as far as I knew. Um, and yeah.
For me, I've well, especially because I do have such a hard time shifting. I mentioned shifting before back in high school, but after my parents found out, I
Uh-huh.
guess I just have this sort of mental block
Mhm.
where I can only do it when I feel like really, 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 really like unbelievably relaxed. And if even then I might not.
Mhm.
Um, so with an inability to shift,
Mhm.
I feel that sort of imposter syndrome in a way.
Mhm.
Be-
Like, it's not happening.
yeah, and it's like a lot of other kin are like, oh, shifting and stuff like that, and oh, I'm this. Like they're always constantly connected to that part of them. I mean, I know not
Mhm.
all other kin shift, but it's talked
It
about a lot.
feels like fuel for the fire if you can't shift, because it kind of feels like a right of being otherkin is you get these
Yeah,
phantom shifts.
and for me, it's like sometimes I feel too human in a way because I'm not always connected with that part of me. So imposter syndrome comes from that sometimes where it's like, wait, am I actually otherkin? Am I making this all up? Like, what is happening? Am I like suddenly human again? Like, what is this? Oh, good. I'm reading the chat and I'm like, I'm glad I'm not alone.
Yeah.
um, we have about 10 minutes left. Do you guys want to open it up to Q&A?
Yeah, I think we should open it up to Q&A. Let's get into it.
Woohoo! And I guess we'll be doing this in the panel 4 chat.
Yep. I've been silently reading everyone's comments, and I just want to say
Same.
thanks for everyone for being so supportive. Very
Yeah,
nice.
thank you so much.
And I think too, a lot of the struggles that original species has can be shared too with just otherkin in general sometimes as well.
Yeah, I get that. Okay, Pale Greenwood asks, how do you guys tell between the original species kintype and another kintype that may be similar? Good question. For me, with vampires and stuff, you at least for me, I kind of compare to other vampires. Like, let's take Dracula as an example. Aversion to garlic. I'm like, no, we definitely like garlic. Aversion to sunlight. It's like, yes, but we don't like, die. It's kind of like enough to know where it's like I am different. And there are so many like vampire related media out there. I can easily just like look and be like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess for being an original species, I mean, I did create the species technically,
Mm-hmm.
so it's automatically like, oh yeah, no, I'm not that kind of vampire. I'm not that kind of vampire. I'm this one that I made up.
Mm-hmm. For me,
Yeah.
for me, for I would say ever since I was like out with my identity, I was always looking for a kin type that may fit my description. I haven't found one yet, and I think like the best I found is like hellhound mixed with werewolf, mixed with hyena, mixed with some other random bits. So if I could find something that was just like exactly what it was, I think I would take off my original species label and just paste that one on and be like, I'm so glad I finally got that clicking feeling, because that would be great. But until then, I am assuming I'm original species. And I see from Rani, they have a good question. Would being someone else's original species, i.e., Dutch angel dragon, also qualify as being an original species kin, in your opinions? I think
Hmm.
that's a really interesting question.
That is a good question. It like toes the line between like being fiction kin and like I mean for me personally I consider original species to be one that like you made up yourself, but I guess technically it would count.
I
It's so
think
weird. Like this is the first time I've ever even explored that.
So I think for me, I've been thinking about it because I actually posted this question at the beginning of the panel as well. I think it depends on perspective, the unique relationship, um, like that person has with their kin type and to the other creator. So like say um you identify as a Dutch angel dragon, you have no idea, and then you find it and you get that click. Um, I think it's going to come down to how the person wants to label. Um,
I guess
they
so, yeah.
and like, cause and like their unique story to each person, because they could be a Dutch angel dragon for the most part, but still have their own canon features that are not like the original creators. So it's going to come down to how much they deviate from it. If they're exactly like it, I would say they'd fall into fiction kin, like word for word, exactly like it by the canon. I think that would make a weird power dynamic though, because you can basically talk to the person who made you. I think that's a whole other discussion.
I think so
Um,
too. The part 2 to the question was interesting. Also, Apíkira, you talked about creating a language, culture, etc. Do you think it's pre-existing to some extent and you're just channeling or remembering it and elaborating on what already exists, or is it fully made up? I guess another way to phrase it, can you add pretty much anything that doesn't directly contradict your experiences, or does adding some things feel wrong for some reason? Good question. For me, I'd say it's um more the latter. I consider it to be fully made up. I recognize real world influence, like real world cultures and stuff like that that have a direct influence in my species. But that's just because I don't use any spiritual. I mean, it could very well possibly be. I have the soul of a vampire and I could be channeling it. But I think more likely for me personally, it's probably the latter. For other people though, it could probably be like a channeling thing. But for me personally, I don't think so.
my question would be, how does epigenetics play into being an original species? Because for me, I have a lot of intuition from my species that I'm learning from. Like the I
Epigenetics, what is that?
epigenetics is basically genetic behaviors you carry on from your parents. So there's
Oh.
like a lab study, for example, showed two crickets, and they're both pregnant crickets. The babies aren't born yet, they're both eggs sitting on the mom. One cricket is basically what they did is they coated a wolf spider's fangs with wax and let that mom cricket, as cruel as this is, get attacked by the wolf spider. It wasn't killed or anything, but that cricket just got traumatized from the wolf spider, and the other cricket wasn't. Then
Huh.
they took the babies of both crickets and put them next to the scent of a wolf spider. The baby crickets that came from the mom who was mauled by the wolf spider were terrified. The ones who weren't didn't care. And that's epigenetics.
Hmm.
Things you learn from your parents that they don't even have to tell you about.
Huh.
And so I think I carry a lot of that with me, which is what I'm learning, how I'm learning from myself, because I don't have a language. I don't really have like anyone to talk to because I'm an original species. I would really like to, though. That's another issue with original species, right? Is like you're alienated a lot.
Yes. Yes. Loneliness is such a big thing with me.
Yeah,
Even
just being
even among
like,
other vampires.
yeah, because you're so
It's
different.
exactly. But
It's
for
like,
me, for the epigenetics thing,
hmm
I don't know if that's that much big of a thing for me. I mean, with how I was raised, I know I was raised being pescatarian, So naturally imprinting that part of myself onto the species, I'm like, okay, Vampirí or pescatarian, like that kind of thing.
Mhm.
But it doesn't play all that big a role. I mean, with
Mhm.
me, I guess I am channeling a lot of myself as I am into the species as I create it
Uh-huh.
and as it evolves, I guess.
Hmm.
Oh my goodness, we have 3 minutes left.
Let's see. How do you tell the difference between having subconsciously created a species with your traits pasted into it and having remembered a specific entity that you were, therefore still have traits, mistaking that for making a species? How do you differentiate the line between creating and remembering when you're so close to the source, having made it? I think it's
Oof.
the same thing. Basically, you're not creating anything, you're labeling something that already exists. Um, so, like, this species does exist, it's your identity. It's just that you're the first person to label it, therefore it's an original species. I don't think you're actually, like, making it up, quote unquote, the same way someone makes up, like, their imaginary friend Douglas, who has red hair that they decided on a whim. If you were Douglaskin, let's say, you may feel like you get dysphoric about your hair color and that it is red, but you don't know why. Um, so you're not really like the person to make those choices, I would say, at least for me.
For me, it's the opposite. For me, let me look back to that question, I guess. For me, I guess I have subconsciously pasted some of my own traits onto the species. I think I briefly mentioned that before, like I don't know, at the last question. But oh shoot, train of thought. Um, but yeah, I don't. I guess the thing with like remembering it or like channeling something else for me, like that almost reminds me of like what one would think of as like a past life or something like that, or like a soul or
Mhm,
something. And for me, I don't think that I don't know that exists. I find it fairly unlikely, but hey, you never know. I guess I'm kind of agnostic that way. But for me, it seems like it's the former. And I actively am creating it. I am, I guess, making the decisions. I am creating the language. I'm creating the vocabulary. And yet it's still like a big part of my identity, I guess. I'm not explaining this very well.
it
um,
can be hard to explain an entire identity and your
it
experience in 5 minutes.
it is. It definitely is. Um, I guess for some people, yeah, you are not creating anything. You're labeling something that already exists.
Mhm,
Maybe that was the case for me. Maybe when I was a little kid, there was a non human part of me and that just evolved. Or maybe I did just make it all up and yet still identified as that thing anyway, as that connection with my creation got stronger. I'm still figuring that out, to be honest.
yeah, I don't think any of us are really going to be experts on identity and otherkin wisdom, I guess. It's such a new thing, and conversations are still new to begin with, you know?
I Oh, it's about time to end. It's 4 o'clock.
Mhm.
If you guys want to continue this conversation in another chat, I would be like delighted to. There's so much more that we could go into. I'm not sure if another panel is going to be in this chat specifically, or if we want to, I don't know, go into a break room or something. I guess we'll figure it out.
Mhm.
If you guys want to continue this, um, but yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
Um,
you.
I honestly would am considering doing like a part two of this next year to continue the conversation.
Yes, I think it's a very helpful conversation. I think a lot of people really resonated with what was said. which I'm very thankful for because I think, you know, it needs to be said. And I think there needs to be more representation about the more quirky parts of Otherkin.
Quirky, that's a great way of putting it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I hope everyone has a great day. I'm gonna be
Yeah, you
hopping off.
too. Yeah, and feel free to ask me any more questions afterwards.
Mhm.
Yeah. See y'all. Bye.
Thank you, everyone.